My name is Margaret Collins. I am 72 years old. 3 days before my husband's estate meeting, my daughter in law leaned close at his funeral and whispered something she thought would break me forever. "We've already decided who gets everything." She said it with a gentle smile, careful not to disturb the people standing around us. Anyone watching would have believed she was comforting a grieving widow. Only I heard the threat hidden beneath her kindness. I looked at the lilies covering David's casket. Then I looked back at her. I smiled. "So have we," I replied quietly. "My husband finished everything back in September." For the first time that morning, Rebecca's smile disappeared. She searched my face, waiting for me to explain. I didn't. Some conversations are worth having only once, and only in the right room. She stepped away before asking one last question. "What do you mean?" I simply folded my hands together. "You'll find out on Tuesday." She spent the rest of the funeral pretending nothing had happened. I spent the rest of it remembering September. That's when everything truly began. The morning the doctors confirmed David's heart condition, he thanked every nurse before leaving the hospital. He never complained, never blamed anyone. On the drive home, he held my hand across the center console exactly the way he had 40 years earlier when we bought our first pickup truck. "We've had a good life," he said. "We have. I need you to trust me." "I always have." He smiled. "I know." I assumed he was talking about treatments, hospital appointments, medication. Instead, he started preparing for something completely different. For nearly 3 weeks, he disappeared every Tuesday morning. He always returned carrying nothing. No shopping bags, no paperwork, nothing at all. One afternoon, I found him writing inside a thick leather notebook in his workshop. The moment he noticed me, he quietly closed it. "What are you working on?" I asked. He smiled. "Something for later." "Can I help?" "Not this time. After 40 years together, you learn there are moments when love means respecting silence." So I kissed his forehead and left him alone. Looking back now, I wish I had asked one more question. David and I founded Collins Woodcraft in 1987. Everyone in town called it David's company, even our own employees. I never corrected them. It was easier that way. David built furniture. I built the business. Every contract, every supplier agreement, every payroll record, every tax filing, every insurance renewal. People saw his hands covered in sawdust. They never saw mine covered in paperwork. That was perfectly fine with me. Until it wasn't. Our son Matthew grew up believing the workshop would someday belong to him. Children often mistake familiarity for ownership. He wasn't a bad man, just comfortable. Too comfortable. He walked through those buildings for decades without asking who actually signed the loans that kept the doors open. Rebecca entered our family 12 years ago. She was intelligent, organized, always planning 5 years ahead. At first, I admired that. Then I noticed something changing. Every Sunday dinner eventually became a conversation about retirement. "You've both worked hard enough. You deserve to travel. It's time for the younger generation." She always smiled while saying it. Always. One evening, David quietly laughed after they drove away. "Did you hear that?" I did. "They're already measuring the curtains." I laughed with him. "I think they're just excited." He slowly shook his head. "No, they're preparing." That sentence stayed with me. 3 weeks later, he hired an attorney without telling anyone except me. Actually, he didn't even tell me then. He simply asked one unusual question over breakfast. If someone only looked at appearances, what would they believe? I poured him another cup of coffee. That you own everything. And do I? I smiled. You've never owned everything. We built everything. He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Exactly. That afternoon, he left the house carrying a plain brown envelope. When he returned, the envelope was gone. Instead, he hugged me longer than usual. If anyone pressures you after I'm gone, don't argue. I won't. Promise. I promise. He nodded once. Good. They'll tell you they've already decided. They'll believe that. But decisions only matter when the paperwork agrees. At the time, I thought he was simply trying to comfort me. I had no idea those words would become the difference between losing everything and watching the truth change an entire family forever. David passed away on a quiet Thursday morning just before sunrise. I was holding his hand when he took his final breath. For nearly an hour, the house belonged only to grief. Then people began arriving. Neighbors, relatives, friends from the workshop. By lunchtime, my son Matthew had already started answering questions that no one had asked him. I'll handle the company. Dad wanted everything kept in the family. He said those words so naturally that most people simply nodded. Rebecca stayed close beside him. She carried a notebook everywhere. Every few minutes, she would disappear into David's office before returning with another folder tucked beneath her arm. I noticed. I simply chose not to interrupt. There would be time for answers later. The funeral was held 3 days afterward. More than 200 people came. David had built furniture for nearly everyone in our county. Church pews, dining tables, school libraries. His work had found its way into people's homes long before they ever knew his name. After the service, everyone gathered in the fellowship hall. Coffee, sandwiches, quiet conversations. Rebecca found her audience almost immediately. It's time for Matthew to lead now, she said. David wanted the next generation to move forward. Several relatives agreed. Marjorie, David's younger sister, spoke loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. Margaret has done enough. She deserves to rest. The business belongs with blood. Blood. Such a powerful word. People use it whenever they run out of facts. I stirred my coffee once before answering. I'm sure David prepared everything exactly the way he wanted. Marjorie smiled. I'm certain he did. Neither of us realized how differently we understood that sentence. The following afternoon, Rebecca arrived carrying a blue folder. Matthew stood behind her without saying much. We wanted to make Tuesday easier, Rebecca said. She placed several papers across my kitchen table. Dad signed these during his final week. They explain what he wanted. I carefully read every page. 43 years handling contracts teaches you something important. People usually focus on signatures. Professionals look at dates, witnesses, formatting, legal language. This document failed every test before I reached the bottom. David's signature was genuine. Everything else felt wrong. Rebecca watched me closely. So, you understand? I understand exactly what I'm reading. Relief crossed her face. I'm glad. She thought I meant agreement. I meant something very different. I quietly pushed the papers back toward her. Thank you for bringing these. Matthew finally spoke. So, we're all right? I smiled. We'll know on Tuesday. Rebecca frowned. I don't understand. You don't need to. That answer clearly irritated her. As they prepared to leave, Matthew lingered near the front porch. He waited until Rebecca reached the driveway. Then he lowered his voice. Mom, I should have asked more questions over the years. I looked at him. What questions? About the business. I always assumed Dad handled everything. You never corrected me. No, I didn't. Why? Because nobody ever asked. For a moment, he looked exactly like the little boy who used to follow David through the workshop carrying tiny scraps of wood in his pockets. I hope Tuesday goes smoothly. So do I. Rebecca called his name from outside. He glanced toward her, then back at me. I'll see you tomorrow. I'll be there. That evening, I walked into David's workshop for the first time since his funeral. Everything remained exactly where he'd left it. His measuring tape, safety glasses, coffee mug, even the radio still sat beside the workbench. Only one thing looked different. A cedar box rested in the center of the table. It hadn't been there before. My name was carved into the lid. Inside, I found 3 items: a handwritten note, a business card, and a sealed cream-colored envelope. The note contained only one sentence. If they arrive before the truth, let them get comfortable. Nothing more. No explanation. Just those words. The business card belonged to attorney Susan Whitmore. I called the number immediately. She answered after the second ring. Mrs. Collins? I've been expecting your call. You knew I'd find the box. David calculated almost everything. I smiled despite myself. That sounds like him. It does. She became serious. Tomorrow morning, come to my office 1 hour before everyone else. Bring the envelope. Don't open it. I won't. And Margaret? Yes. No matter what happens. Let them speak first. I looked down at David's handwriting one more time. Then I answered. They already have. Tuesday morning arrived cold and clear. I wore a simple black dress and David's old wristwatch. It was still 2 links too large for me. I never had it resized. An hour before the family arrived, I met attorney Susan Whitmore in her office above the old bank building. She greeted me with a warm handshake. David planned this very carefully. I've started realizing that. She placed 2 folders on her desk. Between them rested the cream-colored envelope, untouched, exactly as David had left it. He wanted everyone present before this was opened. I understand. He also asked for one more thing. What was that? Let them believe they've already won. I smiled. They've been doing that all week. Susan smiled back. Then we're right on schedule. By 10 o'clock, every chair inside the conference room was occupied. Matthew and Rebecca sat in the front row. Marjorie sat beside them. Several relatives filled the remaining seats. I quietly chose the chair nearest the back wall. Rebecca noticed immediately. You don't have to sit back there. I like seeing the whole room. She nodded politely. She still believed the meeting belonged to her. Susan closed the conference room door. Thank you all for coming. We're here to review the estate of David Collins. Rebecca stood before Susan could continue. I think we should save everyone some time. She placed the papers she'd shown me onto the table. David signed these shortly before he passed. They clearly explain his wishes. Susan looked at them for only a few seconds. Then she gently pushed them aside. I'll address those shortly. Rebecca frowned. They're important. So is the law. The room became silent. Susan opened the first folder. This is the final estate plan David Collins executed on September 18th. Rebecca turned toward me immediately. September. The same month I'd mentioned at the funeral. Susan continued reading. The document contains a revocation clause. It replaces every previous will or estate instruction. It was witnessed by 2 independent parties and notarized according to state law. Matthew's face slowly lost its color. Rebecca interrupted. But he signed ours afterward. A later document always wins. Not necessarily. Susan calmly picked up Rebecca's papers. This document was witnessed only by 2 beneficiaries. It was signed while Mr. Collins was receiving heavy medication. It would not survive a legal challenge. She placed it back on the table. It changes nothing. Rebecca's confidence disappeared. That's impossible. No. It's simply law. Then Susan picked up the cream-colored envelope. David also left a personal letter. He requested it be read aloud. She carefully unfolded the pages. If you're hearing this, then the people sitting in this room have already decided what belongs to them. I'm sorry, Margaret. I should have corrected everyone years ago. I allowed people to believe this company belonged to me. It never did. I built furniture. You built everything else. You negotiated every contract. You signed every loan. You protected every employee. I simply had the easier job because everyone could see mine. Susan paused before continuing. The company belongs exactly where it has always belonged. With the woman who created it beside me. Several people exchanged confused looks. Susan opened the second folder. Collins Woodcraft Incorporated was formed in 1987. She slid several documents across the table. Margaret Collins has owned 56% of this company since the day it was created. The remaining 44% belong to David. His shares now transfer into the Collins Family Trust, managed by Margaret Collins. Matthew whispered, "Mom, you owned the company?" "I always did." "The property itself," Susan continued, "has also been titled solely in Margaret Collins's name since 1994. Rebecca slowly sat back in her chair. She looked completely stunned. No. There has to be some mistake. There isn't. These are public records. They've existed for over 30 years. Marjorie stared at the ownership documents without speaking. Finally, Matthew looked directly at me. "I never knew." "No. You never asked." Silence settled over the room. Rebecca suddenly stood again. "We'll challenge everything." Susan calmly folded the documents. "You're welcome to speak with any attorney. They'll tell you exactly what I'm telling you. The paperwork is complete. The ownership has never been in question." Rebecca opened her mouth, then quietly closed it again. For the first time since David died, she had nothing left to say. I stood slowly. I picked up David's watch from the table where I'd placed it. Then I looked at my son. "The workshop still has a place for you, if you want it, but from today forward, you'll work there because you earn your place, not because you expected it." Matthew lowered his head. "I understand." I believed him, maybe for the first time in years. Outside the courthouse, the autumn sun was shining. I looked back only once. People often think strength comes from speaking louder. David taught me something different. Real strength is preparing the truth long before anyone realizes they'll need to hear it. Sometimes the strongest answer isn't spoken at all. It's waiting quietly inside an envelope until the right day finally arrives.